Ashley Wadsworth. It was a quiet morning in Chelmsford, England, when neighbors were suddenly disturbed by shouting coming from Jack Seppel's apartment. The noise stopped just as quickly as it had started, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Hours later, when police arrived, they uncovered something that shocked even the most experienced officers. Inside, they found 19-year-old Ashley Wadsworth, a Canadian who had traveled halfway across the globe to be with Jack, the man she believed she could love and trust. But what events led Ashley to this tragic point? As details surfaced, a dark story of love, control, and obsession began to unfold. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon, British Columbia, Canada, to parents Kenneth and Christy. She grew up in a large, close-knit family with over 50 relatives living in the same community. After her parents divorced, her father remarried and had 2 more children, Crystal and Brandon. Despite these family changes, Ashley remained very close with her loved ones, especially her niece Paisley, the daughter of her older sister Haley, whom she cherished deeply. Ashley was known for her vibrant and warm personality. Outgoing and well-loved by those around her, she enjoyed activities like swimming, horseback riding, and skiing, along with hobbies such as playing tennis and the clarinet. She was also active on social media, frequently sharing memes, jokes, and photos. It was through these online platforms that she connected with Jack Seppel, a boy from Essex, England. Their virtual friendship began in February 2015 when Ashley was just 12 and Jack was 15. Jack, born on January 9, 1999, came from a complicated family background. He lived with his mother, Tracy Dalton, and stepfather, Ricky, but had a difficult relationship with his late father. His family ties were limited. He had no contact with his brother Jordan, but stayed close with his sister Nadia. People described Jack as both charming and unpredictable, with acquaintances noting a troubled streak. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. His school challenges and occasional aggressive tendencies were early signs of deeper issues. Introduced by a mutual online friend, Ashley and Jack quickly bonded over shared interests and spent hours chatting via her family's computer. Ashley was open about their connection, and her family was aware of their growing friendship. Over time, their relationship deepened, progressing from text chats to video calls. Jack became a regular presence in Ashley's life, sending her gifts such as clothes, teddy bears, and money. However, his obsessive tendencies soon raised concerns among Ashley's loved ones. During disagreements, Ashley would block Jack, only for him to contact her through new accounts or mutual friends. In one striking instance, Jack tattooed Ashley's name on his arm, a gesture her parents found excessive. His jealousy and controlling behavior became evident as he monitored her interactions with others, all while maintaining relationships with other girls himself. Despite these red flags, Ashley remained drawn to Jack. By February 2018, at age 16, Ashley expressed her wish to meet Jack in person. Her family, worried for her safety, forbade her from traveling overseas alone. Despite frequent arguments and Jack's concerning actions, the couple repeatedly reconciled. As Ashley grew older, she began saving money from her jobs at fast food restaurants and department stores. Her dream of meeting Jack became more determined, and with newfound financial independence, she purchased a tablet to maintain her online privacy. By November 12, 2021, Ashley, now 19, decided to pursue her long-held dream. She traveled to the United Kingdom on a 6-month tourist visa to meet Jack for the first time and celebrate her birthday with him. This marked her first international trip and a significant milestone in her life. Despite concerns from family and friends, Ashley's determination and excitement drove her bold decision to embark on this journey. According to those close to her, Ashley traveled with aspirations of exploring the possibility of living with Jack and potentially continuing her education in the UK. The two met in person for the first time on November 13, 2021 at London Gatwick Airport. Thrilled by their encounter, Ashley updated her profile picture that day to one featuring the couple together. Jack, 22 years old, looked notably older than Ashley, who radiated youthful cheerfulness at 19. His heavily tattooed appearance, including facial tattoos, contrasted sharply with her lighthearted demeanor. During her visit, Ashley stayed with Jack at his small apartment in a public housing complex in northwest Chelmsford. While the area had a less-than-ideal reputation, the couple initially enjoyed exploring the more picturesque parts of the city. Jack appeared to be the loving and attentive partner Ashley had come to know online. He showered her with compliments and eagerly posed for romantic selfies. However, his behavior was unpredictable, sometimes turning cruel. Ashley and Jack were inseparable during their time together. Since she was on a tourist visa, Ashley couldn't work. Jack, who was unemployed, relied on public assistance and occasional support from his mother, Tracy, who lived nearby. Ashley frequently posted cheerful updates on social media, sharing photos of the couple and their adventures. They even adopted a puppy named Winston, adding a layer of happiness to their life. As weeks passed, Jack's behavior began to change. He became increasingly withdrawn, preferring to stay home, smoking cannabis, and playing video games rather than going out. This left Ashley, who loved outdoor activities, feeling stifled. Jack's controlling tendencies also intensified. He discouraged her from speaking to neighbors and limited her activities. Before her trip, a friend from Ashley's church had connected her with American missionaries in the UK. Despite her interest in meeting them, Jack forbade her from attending church services. Determined, Ashley maintained secret contact with the missionaries via text, carefully deleting messages to hide them from Jack. The missionaries quickly grew concerned about Jack's controlling and possibly abusive behavior. When Ashley confided in them, she admitted knowing she deserved better, but insisted her main goal was to make Jack happy. The abuse escalated beyond emotional control. About 6 weeks after Ashley's arrival, Jack texted his mother, admitting he had struck Ashley in a jealous rage upon discovering she had blocked 2 British numbers years earlier. Publicly, Ashley continued to present an image of happiness online, but privately, she documented her bruises on a hidden account. She confided in her sister, Haley, but fearing her family would hate Jack, Ashley threatened to cut ties if Haley told their mother. In late December 2021, Jack attempted suicide by overdosing on anxiety medication. Ashley called an ambulance, and he was treated at the hospital. Following this incident, Ashley was designated as Jack's caregiver, tasked with administering his medication safely using a lockbox provided by a nurse. Haley inadvertently revealed the situation to their mother, who pleaded with Ashley to come home, but Ashley insisted that Jack would get better. In early January 2022, another violent incident occurred when Jack smashed a beer glass over Ashley's head. Distraught, Ashley video called Haley while Jack forced her to clean up the broken glass. In the background, Haley could see Jack pacing and shouting. Despite her sister's desperate pleas to leave, Ashley stayed. On January 9th, Jack celebrated his 20th birthday as though nothing had happened, surrounded by family and Ashley. Soon after, Jack's mother and stepfather organized a family trip to Reyes, a quiet coastal town, hoping the change of scenery would ease tensions following Jack's suicide attempt. Photos from the trip portrayed a harmonious image, offering a false sense of reassurance to Ashley's parents who were unaware of the full extent of the abuse. Yet this brief period of peace was short-lived. By late January, Jack's temper flared again during an argument. He physically assaulted Ashley, throwing a candle and a TV remote at her while she was on a video call with Haley. Once again, Haley begged Ashley to return home. Initially, Ashley agreed, but she soon changed her mind, clinging to the belief that Jack's violent persona concealed the charming boy she had once known. Ashley prayed that time, medication, or her love could heal him. From conversations with her mother, it seemed Jack had some awareness of the toxic cycle he had created. He would accuse Ashley of disloyalty, lash out at her, and later apologize profusely. Despite his guilt, it wasn't enough to stop the devastating events that were about to unfold. On the morning of February 1st, 2022, Jack became enraged again, accusing Ashley of sneaking off to meet others. He demanded access to her phone and social media accounts. Around 8 a.m., one of Jack's neighbors heard Ashley screaming through the shared wall. Moments later, Ashley appeared at the neighbor's door barefoot, crying and bleeding from a cut on her hand. She explained that Jack had flown into a rage after finding a photo of a naked woman on her phone, assuming it was someone she knew. He had verbally smashed her phone and thrown their puppy, Winston, against the wall. Despite fearing for her life, Ashley begged the neighbor not to call the police. The neighbor reluctantly agreed, but urged Ashley to accompany her to a medical appointment to avoid returning to Jack's apartment. Ashley refused, prompting the neighbor to confront Jack directly. He apologized for his actions and appeared calm, convincing the neighbor to leave for her appointment. Around 9 a.m., another neighbor, Lucy, brought Jack a misdelivered package. Jack barely cracked open the door, which Lucy found strange but shrugged off as typical of his distant behavior. Meanwhile, Ashley used Jack's phone to call her family. It was midnight in Vernon, and by that time, Ashley's mother had learned about Jack's abusive behavior after Haley could no longer keep it hidden. Her family quickly arranged a return flight for her on February 3rd. Ashley told Jack she would be leaving in 2 days, and he reluctantly agreed to take her for a COVID test and drive her to the airport. Ashley's mother warned her to head straight to the airport if Jack became violent again and promised to involve the police if Ashley was harmed. While Ashley's family was getting ready for her return, Haley contacted Jack's mother, who was about to leave on a trip and unable to intervene. Before ending the call, Jack's mother voiced her fear that Jack might hurt himself once Ashley left. Ashley's phone call with her family lasted about 3 hours. When it ended, it was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon. Moments later, the day took a tragic turn. Later, Jack messaged his mother, admitting he had attacked Ashley again, throwing her to the ground and possibly fracturing her arm. His mother did not reply. Between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 p.m., Ashley sent several messages to her family and friends in Vernon using Jack's phone. Unfortunately, due to the time difference, no one responded. She also messaged her church friends in Chelmsford, pleading for help and saying it was an emergency. Tragically, these messages did not send until hours later, by which time it was too late. Sometime between 12:38 and 12:45 p.m., Jack strangled Ashley until she stopped breathing. He then retrieved a knife from the kitchen and stabbed her over 90 times in the chest and abdomen. After killing Ashley in such a brutal manner, Jack carried on with his day, even playing video games. He changed his profile picture to one of himself and Ashley, captioning "It always mine." He also recorded a video message addressed to Haley expressing love for Ashley and apologizing. In the video, Jack claimed he couldn't let Ashley go and that his mind wasn't functioning properly. Ashley's lifeless body was visible beside him in the recording. Although Jack never sent the video, he inflicted superficial wounds on his chest likely to fabricate a self-defense narrative. Meanwhile, Ashley's family woke up in Vernon to find her desperate messages. Alarmed, they contacted a friend of Ashley's in Chelmsford. The friend went to Jack's apartment, but after receiving no response at the door, he called the police and left. Around 4 p.m., Ashley's best friend in Vernon noticed her social media account was active and sent a message in panic. Jack, pretending to be Ashley, replied, claiming she no longer needed help and everything was fine. Jack ignored subsequent messages from Ashley's family and friends who were becoming increasingly frantic. Finally, Jack called his sister Nadia and confessed to killing Ashley. During the call, he even showed her Ashley's body. At 4:13 p.m., police entered Jack's apartment in response to the earlier call from Ashley's friend. Inside, they discovered the horrific culmination of an abusive and tragic relationship. Across the globe in Vernon, Ashley's family was desperately trying to reach her after reading her messages for help and receiving no further responses. Haley, convinced the worst had happened, tearfully called their father and told him she had taken Ashley's life. Kenneth contacted Canadian authorities expressing grave concern for his daughter's safety in England. Shortly after, he received confirmation from British authorities. Ashley had been killed. Jack was arrested on the spot, covered in blood, and confessed to the crime, claiming he had experienced a psychotic episode. He was sent to Chelmsford Prison to await trial, which was scheduled for September 7, 2022 at Chelmsford Crown Court. Toxicology reports revealed traces of cannabis and therapeutic levels of his anti-anxiety medication in his system at the time of the crime. Psychiatric evaluations determined he was fit to stand trial. The evidence against Jack was overwhelming, including the video he recorded admitting to the murder. Jack pleaded guilty, and the judge informed him there was only one possible sentence: life imprisonment. He was remanded in custody until the sentencing hearing set for October 10th to allow Ashley's family to attend virtually. However, her parents chose to travel to Essex to be present in person. During the hearing, the prosecutor detailed Jack's criminal history, shocking Ashley's parents as they learned the truth about the man who had taken their daughter's life. Jack's criminal record laid bare a history of troubling behavior, adding to the devastation felt by Ashley's grieving family. In February 2014, at just 15 years old, Jack's troubling behavior began to surface. He took explicit photos of a girl he had met online. When the girl ended their relationship, Jack retaliated by hacking her social media accounts and publishing the images, leading to a restraining order against him. Just a month later, he violated the order by continuing to contact her online. That same year, Jack physically assaulted Mother during an argument about his Xbox, pushing her to the floor and ripping a door off its hinges. By March, he had breached the restraining order again, sending another social media request to his victim. When the restraining order expired in February 2017, Jack contacted the girl within 6 minutes using manipulative tactics similar to those he later employed with Ashley. In one chilling message, he declared she could never get rid of him even if it meant he went to prison. By February 2018, Jack's behavior had escalated further. After cutting his arm and damaging a door when his mother called paramedics, he was sent to a juvenile detention center. A new restraining order was issued to protect his mother, but Jack breached it later that year. In September, he broke into an assisted living facility and received a 21-day prison sentence. In 2020, Jack faced accusations of false imprisonment, assault, and coercive behavior after locking a woman in his home. Although the charges were dropped due to the victim's absence at trial, a restraining order was imposed. Later that year, another relationship ended when Jack became violent and controlling. He choked the woman and locked her in his home, but she managed to escape. Despite this, no charges were filed. Ashley's parents were devastated to learn of Jack's violent history during the sentencing hearing. The court also reviewed a letter Jack had written from prison addressed to Ashley's mother and Haley. In the letter, Jack expressed remorse, admitting that nothing he could say or do would bring Ashley back or ease their pain. He claimed his deteriorating mental health had led to intrusive thoughts that influenced his actions, though he acknowledged this was no excuse for his behavior. Considering Jack's extensive history of violence and his guilty plea, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 23 years. While Ashley's parents left the courtroom knowing that justice had been served, they were burdened with the unbearable loss of their beloved daughter. On October 12th, Ashley's parents, her stepmother, a close friend, and Julie Taylor, a campaigner against knife violence who had lost her teenage grandson, Liam, to a stabbing, held a vigil in her memory. The group walked from Brownings Avenue to the site where Ashley had spent her final days. They laid wreaths and placed roses on the doorstep. Ashley's mother paused quietly at the location, mourning her daughter in a reflective moment. Neighbors, some of whom had attended Jack's sentencing, came out to show their support for the grieving family. Ashley's remains were returned to Canada with the help of a crowdfunding campaign that raised hundreds of donations organized by her family. Her funeral took place on February 23, 2022, and was live-streamed to allow more people to participate. Funds left over after covering funeral expenses were donated to a scholarship foundation and a domestic violence support organization. During the service, speakers fondly remembered Ashley as a vibrant and adventurous young woman with a deep love for nature and an infectious sense of humor. A year after Ashley's tragic death, her sister Haley shared in an interview that she believed Ashley was sending them signs from above. The family noticed unexplained phenomena such as doors opening and closing on their own and flickering lights. Following the trial, Ashley's father raised concerns about the lack of accessible information regarding Jack's history. Although they searched his name online before Ashley's trip, they found nothing alarming. He questioned when the right to privacy should be revoked for individuals with a history of repeated violence. In the UK, there is a domestic abuse disclosure scheme known as Clare's Law, named after a victim who was killed by a partner with a record of stalking and threats. The law allows individuals to request information about someone's criminal history and grants police the authority to disclose it proactively. However, the process can be slow, and disclosure isn't guaranteed. Ashley's mother expressed regret for not knowing about Claire's law, believing she might have been able to request help from British authorities before her daughter's trip. Domestic abuse continues to be a widespread issue, affecting women of all ages, social classes, and backgrounds worldwide. According to Women's Aid, a UK organization, a woman in England and Wales is killed by a current or former male partner every 4 days on average. Despite clear warning signs in Ashley and Jack's online relationship, Ashley chose to overlook them and go meet him. It's understandable to question why someone like Ashley would ignore such red flags. Women's Aid explains that victims often stay in abusive relationships for complex reasons, holding on to hope that their partner's apologies and promises to change are sincere. Abuse typically begins once the relationship is firmly established, making it even harder for victims to leave. For Ashley, despite everything, she believed Jack had a good heart deep down and thought her love could make a difference. Tragically, by the time she realized she was wrong and decided to distance herself, it was already too late. Moving on to the next case. Brianna Dennison. These days, many people carry pepper spray or a similar form of protection whenever they leave home. It's become a common item, something nearly everyone has on them at all times. Given the current state of the world, it's almost as essential as carrying your wallet or house keys. But what happens when a crime is so disturbing that it drives even college students to purchase firearms for their personal safety? That's exactly what happened in this case. College students, young adults, started arming themselves with weapons capable of taking lives. This shift was triggered by the disappearance of Brianna Dennison, a 19-year-old junior majoring in child psychology at Santa Barbara City College. He vanished after visiting a friend in Reno, Nevada, turning a terrifying possibility into a harsh reality. Can you imagine anything more terrifying than being taken from a place where you felt safe and at home in the dead of night? As the investigation progressed, increasingly disturbing details surfaced, deepening public concern. The case of Brianna Dennison, marked by fear, violence, and a heartbreaking outcome, stands as a chilling reminder of a winter break turned tragic. Known to friends and family as Brianna Dennison was born on March 29, 1988, to Jeff and Bridget Dennison. She grew up in a small, tightly bonded family alongside her younger brother, Brighton. The family had been living comfortably in Reno, Nevada, where Jeff ran a business. But their happiness was cut short when, in 1994, Jeff tragically died by suicide at the age of 34. At the time, his business was under federal investigation for embezzlement. His death was a devastating blow to the family. The consequences of Jeff's choice shattered their world. Despite the grief and turmoil, the Dennisons eventually found strength in one another, relying on their close-knit bond to heal and move forward. The friendship between Bridget, Bree, and Brighton was wonderful and full of love. Bridget was a single mom who worked hard to give her kids everything they could want. Bree was a friendly and smart little girl when she was younger. After Jeff's death, the Dennison family quickly fell apart. Shortly after, the family moved to Mendocino, California, which is where Bridget grew up, and Bree was very happy with the change. Bree liked getting along with everyone, which made her easy to talk to and popular. Bree finished from Reno High School in 2006 after going there. Bree wanted to study child psychology in college, so she went to Santa Barbara City College in California. She was a junior there at the time of the case. People who knew Bree well knew that she had picked the right major. One thing Bree liked was going on trips. Being able to study abroad in Rome, Italy for a year gave her her first taste of traveling. After that, Bree took many trips all over the world, going to Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France, among other places. Even though she was only 19, Bree lived in the present, made memories, and did what she thought was best for her. She also had a wonderful bond with her brother, Brighton. Bree was a great bigger sister who always gave Brighton honest, useful advice. People always go to their older brothers when they need help because they know they can solve any problem. Sure enough, Brighton did look at Bree that way. From what I could tell, Bree was a genuine and happy young woman who was doing well in college and had a lot to look forward to. But something terrible happened in January 2008 when she was back in Reno for winter break. It was another terrible blow to the Dennison family. Bree had her winter break in January 2008, and she chose to visit Reno, Nevada to see some high school friends. So she and her friends planned to go to a few events put together by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a tour company that catered to students. Around the same time, Bree and her friends were also going to Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. So Bree and her friends had a lot going on that January 19th evening. They went to the events and had a great time at the music and other activities. One of the fun times was at a party at the Sands Regency Resort, which is now called J Resort on North Arlington Avenue. Before anyone knew it, it was well past midnight. Katie's house near the University of Nevada was where Bree, her friend Jessica, and Katie were staying. The apartment was off campus and could be found on Reno's McKay Court. When Katie and Bree got home, Jessica was already home with an unknown guy. She wanted to get enough rest for work the next day. Katie and Bree changed into their night clothes when they got home and went to bed. Bree wanted to sleep in the living room for some reason, so she put a pillow, 2 blankets, and a toy bear on the couch to make a bed. Katie went to her room. To give you some background, it's important to know that the girls' house had a main glass door that was never locked. The idea behind it was that if any of the roommates lost their keys and no one was home, they could easily get in. I don't think that was the best thing to do, of course. Even though it's clear that this was a bad idea, no one ever said that college students make the best choices. The girls thought they were safe because nothing bad had ever happened before. But just because bad things haven't happened before doesn't mean they never will. This mistake had a terrible result that the Dennison family and Bree's friends would never forget. Phone records showed that Bree talked to Cameron, her boyfriend, that night. They had been dating for a long time since their first year of college. On the phone, they had a fight about Bree going to college parties late at night. But after some time, they worked things out, and Bree seemed to fall asleep. On January 20th, the next morning, around 9 a.m., Jessica and Katie got up and got ready for the day. They saw that Bree wasn't on the couch, but they didn't think much about it. The girls thought Bree might have gone to her room in the middle of the night, but they didn't check because, well, everything seemed fine. But after hours, Bree still hadn't come out of her room, so the girls went to see what was wrong. Bree wasn't in her room, though. It looked like she never even went into her room. Something stood out to Jessica and Katie when they went back to the living room. One blanket was still on the couch, but the other was found on the kitchen floor next to the back door, a long way from the couch. Bree's teddy bear was also gone, but the scariest thing Katie and Jessica saw was a red spot on her pillow. Bridget, Bree's mom, was called right away by Katie and Jessica to let her know that Bree was dead. Since Bree's wallet, phone, and bag were still at home, she must have left them somewhere. Bridget called 911. Police arrived right away because she was so scared. As the police searched the living room and the house, they found that nothing was missing or broken. However, since the front door was unlocked, they thought that Bree had probably been taken in the middle of the night, which was a terrible thought, but the most likely explanation. When the police looked closely at the pillow, they found a lot of strange things about it. First, the pillow had 3 red spots and mascara all over one side of it. The cops thought that Bree might have cried while she was on the phone with her boyfriend arguing. How could they explain the scary spots, though? That would have to wait, though, because when the police looked more closely at the pillow, they found something even scarier. The small holes on it were what the police could only describe as bite marks. In other words, Bree wasn't crying on the pillow. She was probably being pushed down on it to drown out her screams. Investigators quickly taped off the house so that it could be analyzed for forensic purposes. They found male DNA on the doorknob and couch, as well as her DNA in the red spots on her pillow. While Bree was missing, her case was being looked into, and the FBI got involved pretty quickly. The case was hard to understand. After being taken from a place where she thought she was safe, Bree could not be found. To make things even scarier, women had been brutally attacked in the same area several times in the past couple of months, so it was very likely that this person was a repeat offender. First, the police checked with Bree's closest friends and family, and the last people who spoke or connected with her. Some of those people were Cameron, Bree's boyfriend, and the man who drove Jessica home. But both had strong excuses, and their DNA proved they weren't the ones who did it. Anyway, the police had to follow up on every lead they got. On January 29, 2008, 9 days after Bree went missing, a woman came forward. A woman reported that her friend had been robbed in the parking lot of the University of Nevada. It was a deeply upsetting incident. Someone had taken advantage of her, yet she couldn't clearly see the attacker's face. All she could recall was that the assailant was a white male driving a blue pickup truck, possibly a 2007 or 2008 Toyota Tacoma. After the attack, the woman went to the police to file a report and provide a DNA sample. With this new lead, investigators compared the DNA from Brianna Dennison's case to the DNA collected from the earlier assault. To their astonishment, the samples matched. It was the same individual responsible for both crimes. Although this revelation was devastating for Bree's loved ones, it marked a crucial breakthrough in the investigation. With this new evidence in hand, detectives made the information public in hopes of generating more leads. Their efforts paid off when another woman came forward, revealing that she had also been violently attacked in the same area, in a manner eerily similar to how Bree had gone missing. Another thing that both of these violent crimes had in common was that the attackers took something as a trophy: women's underwear. To have a reminder of the cruel and brutal attack on a victim who didn't know what was going on is just plain sick, in my opinion. Aside from that, the other woman had caught a glimpse of the man's face, and a combination sketch was made to try to help find the man and Bree before it was too late. A huge search for Bree took place that covered almost 100 square miles. A huge number of people came to look for Bree. Nevada's First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, who was married to Governor Jim Gibbons, was one of them. Since the first two people this violent man hurt were still living, Bree's mom, Bridget, was still hopeful that her daughter would also be safe and come home. Investigators also looked through a list of violent criminals in the area where Bree was taken, but they didn't find anything. That is until February 2008, almost a month after Bree went missing, someone found her. Albert Jimenez, a worker at EE Technologies, was taking a lunch break on February 15th at a nearby Reno subway. Along the way back to work, he saw something on the side of the street next to an empty lot. It looked like a doll with bright orange socks on. We all know, though, that these findings are never just dolls. When he got closer, his eyes finally understood what they were seeing. The body was that of a woman. He ran back to work right away and called the cops. Even before the cops got there, they knew something was wrong. 2 sets of underwear were found next to the body. One of them was Bree's, but the other one was hard to figure out. But it wasn't long before the body was recognized as that of Bree Dennison, who was 19 years old. The news that Bree's family got wasn't easy to handle no matter how much they had planned. This was the worst fear of everyone. But now it was also true. The autopsy reports for Bree were also very scary. Even though she was badly hurt, police think the killer probably killed her with his or her bare hands. But when the police told Bree's family and friends about everything, her friend Katie noticed something was off. One of the pairs of underwear that couldn't be identified that was found with Bree's body was hers. Therefore, it made everyone nervous about how the person did it who got Katie's clothes. This means he had to have been in their house without them knowing, going from room to room, looking for the right person to kill. It was too bad that there were still no hints about who did it at this point. Even though the Dennison family really wanted to catch the bad guy and make him pay, it took police more than 10 months to finally make progress in the case. Anyway, how did the police find the person who did those violent acts and killed Bree? Someone who knew this pig well chose to tell on him. And it all began on November 1st, 2008. On the way back from Washington State, where her husband got a job in March of that year, a woman told her best friend that she had found several pairs of women's underwear in his truck. The best friend saw parallels between this case and many other violent crimes and decided to use the secret witness program to turn the man in. The man in question was James Michael Beeler, who was 27 years old and used to live in Sparks, Nevada. He used to work as a repair worker and even as a pipe fitter. Besides that, he had been in the service, but he was kicked out for using illegal drugs. He also had a blue belt in martial arts and an attitude that was easy to get angry over. He was also married and had a child. It's funny that he was caught while dropping off his son at the Reno Stepping Stones Children's Center. He was being charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, but when he was asked about it, James refused to give his DNA and said he had nothing to do with any of the crimes. It was up to the detectives to do some sneaky work since they knew James wouldn't give up easy. They asked James's wife to give them their son's DNA on her own, and she agreed. The test showed that the son's straight relative had left his DNA at the house where Bree was taken. Police were now confident they had identified the perpetrator. DNA evidence linked James directly to Bree's body as well as to 2 other victims, providing irrefutable proof. With this solid forensic link, authorities secured both an arrest warrant and a DNA warrant for James. Their plan worked. James walked straight into the trap they had laid, thanks in part to his wife and, indirectly, his son. As investigators dug into James's background, they discovered a troubling history. He had been arrested back in 2001 for threatening his lover's neighbor with a knife. They also tracked down James's blue pickup truck, which perfectly matched the description given by one of his earlier victims. Although the truck had since been sold, police managed to locate it and examine it for evidence. Inside, they discovered fibers from the clothing Bree had worn on the night she disappeared, another critical piece of evidence linking James to the crime. It was standard for James to say he wasn't guilty, and a hearing was set up. If James was found guilty, he could have faced both life in jail without the chance of parole and the death penalty. The trial began on May 12, 2010, and went on for about 15 days. There was a lot of proof against this man. Co-workers, victims, and even James's own wife testified against him. The prosecution says James was in the area around McKay Court on January 20th and was only looking for someone to beat up. That's when he found Katie's apartment and saw Bree sleeping through the living room windows. He decided right then that she would be his next target. He easily got in because the door wasn't locked, beat up Bree, and basically kidnapped her. He then took her to a remote area in his truck and killed her so he wouldn't get caught, but not before forcing himself on her in a way that broke her heart. Bree was sound asleep when all of this started. I can't even picture the fear. His boss also spoke in court and said that James's behavior became more unpredictable and antsy after Bree's body was found. Another thing the boss said was that James told him she had it coming when he asked about Bree's body being found. But the truth is that she didn't. She was sound asleep in her own home. In order to come up with something like this, how many mental flip-flops did this man do? There's more, though. As if that made a difference. James's lawyers thought it would be a great idea to show him as a troubled guy with a sad and abusive past. You can always use your past to explain what you did, but it's never an excuse for what you did. The defense also tried to get the jury to be easy on James because he was a model inmate, whatever that means. I don't think the words model and inmate belong together. James was finally found guilty of all crimes on May 27, 2010. What really shocked me was that James was given the death penalty on July 30, 2010, just a couple of months later. He also got 4 more life sentences for assaulting and kidnapping 2 people before Bree attacked and killed them. All of these victims also testified in court. Not only did they all name James in front of the judge, but one of the women asked him to look her in the eye while she spoke. He refused. How brave this woman is. It really was amazing. She understood that this wasn't just for herself, but also for Bree. She knew this was her last chance to say something bad about this man, but she didn't take it because she was brave and bold along with the other victim and the officer's hard work. This man will never hurt anyone else again. After Bree's sad death on February 23, 2008, there was a gathering. People who went wore blue because that was Bree's favorite color. People who knew her left flowers, notes, pictures, and ribbons to remember the young 19-year-old woman who had so much more to live for and experience. Brianna's law was also put into effect in Nevada. The rule said that all felons, no matter how bad their crimes were, had to give their DNA so that it could be added to a criminal database. To explain further, James had been caught before in February 2001, but his DNA wasn't in the system. Because of this, Bree's case took almost a year to finish. As for Bree's family, they are still very sad and broken over her death. Bridget and Brighton have already lost a husband and father, and now they also have to deal with Bree's death. For them to say that it's hard is pointless because they are trying to move on. It's so much worse than what most of us can even begin to understand. After Bree's case got a lot of attention, a lot of people bought guns, pepper spray, and safety devices, especially around the University of Nevada. And honestly, who could blame them? A man with a violent past escalated to murder, taking the life of an innocent young woman. Bree had felt safe where she was, but this horrifying crime shattered that sense of security, not just for her, but for the entire community. Suddenly, even locked doors and familiar surroundings didn't feel safe. All of that fear and unease stemmed from one man's horrific actions. Now, Years later, one can only hope the Dennison family has found some measure of peace. It seems that Brighton, Bree's brother, has started a new chapter in his life and is now the father of a 4-year-old. As for Bree's mother, her current circumstances remain unknown, but one can only hope she found a way to heal and carry on. Losing a husband and then a daughter, both under tragic circumstances, is an almost unimaginable burden for one person to bear. Moving on to the next case. Connecticut murders. Between June and July of 1984, 4 separate women in Connecticut were violated and assaulted by the same man. The victims, whose identities have never been publicly revealed, are referred to as Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each woman reported being blindfolded and attacked inside her own home by an unknown assailant. Disturbingly, all 4 victims mentioned that the attacker rifled through their personal belongings, ate food from their refrigerators, and left faucets running. Investigators linked these crimes together after DNA collected at each scene showed that the same man was responsible. However, DNA technology at the time wasn't advanced enough to identify the perpetrator. These assaults occurred in Windsor, Bloomfield, Middletown, and Rocky Hill, Connecticut. For years, leads stalled and detectives struggled to uncover the attacker's identity. A breakthrough came in February 2020 when modern DNA analysis connected Michael Sharp to the cases. DNA evidence collected from crime scene items like linens, laundry, and towels matched Sharp, firmly tying him to the assaults. DNA recovered from his trash by investigators proved that he was indeed responsible. In February, 69-year-old Michael Marion Sharp of Marlborough, Connecticut, was arrested. With this arrest, the victims of these crimes who have waited more than 3 decades to see their attacker brought to justice now know he will be held accountable for his crimes, Chief State's Attorney Richard Colangelo said in a statement. Turning to forensic genetic genealogy as a possible breakthrough for unsolved cases shows that the cold case unit's investigators never forget the victims of these crimes. Supervisory Assistant State's Attorney John F. Faggy, head of the cold case unit, said in a statement after Sharp was arrested. Sharp was once a chief executive officer of a group that ran the Jamoke Academy, a tuition-free charter school in Hartford. Sharp's trial began in February in the Hartford Superior Court. 3 of the women were in the courtroom, while the 4th took part via video conference. All 4 testified about being attacked in their bedrooms in the middle of the night and how they suffered lifelong trauma. Relatives of Sharp also testified and asked Judge Frank DeDebo for leniency. In February 2020, police were led to Michael Sharp after relatives of his submitted DNA samples to the Guedes Match website, a public genealogy database used to help solve cold cases. Investigators then collected DNA samples from trash outside Sharp's home and later took cheek swabs, both of which matched the DNA found at the crime scenes. Forensic experts informed the jury that there was a 1 in 7 billion chance the DNA belonged to anyone other than Sharp. The first victim, a 25-year-old woman living in an apartment in Bloomfield, reported that on June 3, 1984, she was burglarized and assaulted by a male intruder. She told law enforcement, "The intruder placed his hand over my mouth and told me not to scream or he would shoot me and my roommate." After a 5-day trial in Hartford, a state jury took less than an hour to unanimously convict Sharp on all 8 kidnapping charges. While assault charges could not be brought due to a 5-year statute of limitations in effect at the time, kidnapping charges have no such limit. Following his conviction, Sharp apologized to the victims but claimed he had memory problems and no recollection of the crimes. On February 71-year-old Sharp received a 72-year sentence for his role. Judge Frank M. DeDebo, who handed down the sentence in a Hartford courtroom, imposed a minimum of 40 years behind bars. The judge compared the pain Sharp's victims endured to lifelong sentences. The 4 women would forever be haunted by the agonizing trauma he inflicted. The judge called Sharp a predator, stating in court, "You fit that definition. A person who ruthlessly exploits others." Chief State's Attorney Patrick Griffin praised the years of hard work and cooperation among multiple agencies, saying, "Today's sentencing shows that relentless efforts and advances in forensic science can finally bring justice." He added that the cold case unit never gives up and continually uses the latest technology to solve difficult cases. Griffin expressed hope that Sharp's prison sentence would bring some measure of peace to the courageous women who testified during the trial. After sentencing, Sharp addressed his victims, saying, "I just don't know how I could have possibly done something so monstrous." He also remarked that he had left it to the jury to decide whether he was a monster, and they found him to be one. Moving on to the next case. Lena Reyes Guedes. Lena Reyes Guedes was born on August 26, 1960, in a small town in Mexico. She dreamed of achieving great things in life. An accomplished ballerina with a degree in international business, Lena aspired to become a top business tycoon with influence across borders. Her passion for international business also shaped her choice in a life partner. Growing up, she wanted someone who would love her as much as she loved him, and who shared her ambition and career goals. In 1996, at 35 years old, Lena left her hometown in Mexico and moved to the United States, seeking better opportunities and hoping to meet people with a similar business mindset. While honing her skills and gaining experience, she waited for the right man. That same year, she met Edward Guedes in New Mexico. Edward was 25 years older than Lena, but embodied everything she wanted in a partner. Beyond his attractive appearance, he was a seasoned business owner who knew the ins and outs of the business world. Lena Reyes had fallen deeply for Edward and believed that with him, she could achieve the future she always dreamed of. They began dating, and just 6 months later, they got married and settled into an apartment in Youngstown, Ohio. What happened to her career after that remains unclear, and whether she continued pursuing it is unknown. 2 years later, on April 8, 1998, Lena planned a trip back to Mexico to visit her family, flying through Texas. She reportedly packed a blue sleeping bag as a gift for her young cousin before leaving. However, the day passed, and Lena Reyes Guedes never reached Mexico. No sign of her was ever found. Her family in Mexico grew frantic when her flight failed to arrive. Days, weeks, and months went by, but the Reyes family couldn't contact her. When they reached out to Edward Guedes to ask about her whereabouts, he claimed he hadn't seen Lena since she left on April 8, 1998, to visit them. Her family's concern deepened, sensing that something was terribly wrong, as it was unlike Lena to disappear without any trace. They then called the police in Ohio to report their daughter and sister missing. Edward Guedes, on the other hand, initially failed to file a missing person report until 6 months later in October of 1998 did he inform the police that his wife was missing. The first suspect in the case was Edward Guedes. He was brought in for questioning by the Youngstown police in October 1998. When he was asked about his missing wife, Edward Guedes told the state investigators that he last saw her when he dropped her off at the airport in Pittsburgh. He said Lena Reyes Guedes carried a suitcase, a cosmetic case, and a blue sleeping bag that he said was supposed to be a gift for her young cousin. He mentioned to the investigators that he kissed his wife goodbye outside the airport, and that was the last time he saw her. With no evidence pinning him to Lena Reyes Guedes' disappearance, the police struck out Edward Guedes as a suspect. Authorities in Ohio did all they could to find Lena Reyes, but no leads were ever found, and the case slowly dwindled and went cold. Meanwhile, on April 20th, 1998, in Garfield County, Utah, a civilian passing through State Route 276 Milepost stumbled upon something suspicious at the Maiden Water Spring, near Lake Powell and Ticabo. They stopped and walked over to the odd-looking item and soon realized it was a large bundle, roughly the length and dimensions of a human body, which had been discarded just off the side of the road. At that point, the passerby contacted the local Garfield County Sheriff's Department, and within minutes, officers were quickly dispatched to the scene. The officers approached the bundle and noticed whatever was inside was wrapped in a children's rug, which had a design of houses and roadways on which children could play. They then began to unroll the large rug and soon discovered a sleeping bag inside. Inside the sleeping bag was a patchwork of various plastic trash bags secured with duct tape and bound with rope. Everyone at the scene had a bad feeling about what they were about to discover as the investigators gradually cut away and peeled off the layers of tape and plastic. When the last layer came off, investigators got a shocking discovery. Lying in the discarded bundle was the body of a woman who had wounds which indicated that she had died as a result of a gunshot to the head. The woman was described as having multiple dental restorations, freckles on her face, tattooed eyebrows, and several moles, which included a unique mole on her right ear. Though her face was still identifiable, her fingers had been chopped off in what is thought to have been an attempt to hide her identity by the perpetrator. The autopsy done on her revealed that the cause of her death was as a result of the gunshot wound she had suffered. In a bid to identify her, her statistics were imputed into online databases, which described her as Hispanic or Native American with dark eyes, dark shoulder-length hair, and a freckled complexion, but no missing persons reports in the state matched her description. Despite all efforts made to identify her, nobody came forward, and she became another Jane Doe who was dubbed the maiden water victim after the natural spring by which she had been found. With no leads, the case went cold. In the year 2018, the Utah State Bureau of Investigation decided to appeal to the public for leads when they carried out a cold case maiden water victim, including a photo of the unique mole inside the arch of her right ear. That same week, police in Youngstown, Ohio, who were updating their missing persons cases, obtained a photo of Lena Reyes Guedes from the United States Department of Homeland Security. They then released the photo to the public. Days later, a woman in California who was a true crime fan and an amateur sleuth got in touch with authorities in Utah to say that she had seen a missing person cold case in Ohio in which the victim seemed to look similar. The true crime fan had noted the mole on the upper arch of the maiden water victim's ear. In the Ohio's published photo of Lena Reyes Guedes, a mole was visible in the same spot. After the Ohio and Utah authorities were made aware of this, they followed the tip and discovered that Lena Reyes Guedes and the maiden water victim weren't just similar, but were one and the same. Authorities from Utah and Ohio then put out new information in Texas, hoping to find Lena Reyes Guedes' family members. Luckily, Lena Reyes Guedes' sister, Lucero Reyes, who was just 11 years old when Lena disappeared, called the authorities to inform them that Lena Reyes Guedes was her sister. In order to ascertain that fact, provision was made for Lucero Reyes, who traveled over 300 miles to Monterrey, to the United States consulate nearest to the family's home in San Luis Potosí, so that authorities could obtain a sample of her DNA. After the DNA testing was done, the maiden water Jane Doe was confirmed to be her missing sister. Scott Kimball said he had been at a family reunion in Bryce Canyon, Utah, around the time of the murder. Detectives were hopeful that Scott Kimball could actually be Lena Reyes Guedes' killer. However, their hopes were quickly dashed when they interviewed Scott for over 2 hours and realized he did not know anything about the crime scene where Lena Reyes Guedes was found. The detectives, who were disappointed, were forced to rule him out as a suspect when his DNA didn't match with the one at the crime scene. The investigators then concluded that the glaring similarities between his victims and Lena Reyes Guedes were merely coincidences. After Lena Reyes Guedes was identified, people who knew her and her husband in Ohio came forward with some tips that suggested Edward Guedes as the murderer. In February 2019, investigators decided to try the new techniques in DNA analysis, which were making headlines at the time, following the eventual solving of the Golden State Killer case. The West Jordan Police Department then used an MVAC, a device similar to a shop vac, to extract genetic evidence on the rope that had been used to bind Lena Reyes Guedes. During the genetic evidence extraction, 2 different genetic samples belonging to 2 different individuals were found on the rope. This caused confusion for a while until it was later realized that one of the DNA sample belonged to a not expert who detectives consulted on the case. Once the detectives identified who Lena Reyes Guedes was and where she might be connected to, they launched an investigation to uncover who was responsible for her death. Early on, officials from the Utah Department of Public Safety considered whether Scott Kimball, a convicted serial killer serving a 70-year sentence in Colorado for murdering 4 people, including his uncle between 2003 and early 2004, might be involved. 3 of Kimball's victims were discovered in remote areas across Colorado and Utah, and there were striking similarities between the circumstances of those deaths and Lena's case. For example, the cause of Lena's death resembled that of Kimball's victims, and he was known for discarding bodies by wrapping them up. In one instance, Kimball tied a victim's hands with a complex knot system that matched the details found at Lena's crime scene. Kimball had also used a child's play mat to dispose of a body before. His ex-wife and son testified that they saw him purchase a rug similar to the one used to wrap Lena Reyes Guedes' body. As detectives put these pieces together, they were close to solving the mystery behind Lena's death. A DNA warrant was then issued in Logan County, where Kimball had admitted to Colorado investigators that he had killed 21 people. He mentioned that one victim was a hitchhiker he killed on a bridge near Height, Utah, in 1998 or 1999, just about 10 miles from where Lena's remains were found. He had accidentally added his own DNA to the sample on the rope and contaminated it. Regardless, investigators were able to isolate another piece of genetic material that appeared to have belonged to Edward Guedes. Unfortunately, Edward Guedes had died by suicide in Nevada in February 2001, 3 years after Lena Reyes Guedes was murdered. It became impossible to directly compare his DNA to the one found at the crime scene because, after his death, he was cremated. However, in order to ascertain that the DNA sample found on the rope really belonged to Edward Guedes, a company called Pure Gold Forensics used familial DNA from 3 of his living relatives, one of them being his son. The DNA testing came out a match to the DNA found on the rope used to tie Lena Reyes Guedes. In 2022, the Utah State Bureau investigation then considered the Lena Reyes Guedes case solved and Edward Guedes to be the murderer. Unfortunately, he died by suicide, taking the question of why he killed his wife to his grave. It is no doubt that Edward Guedes went to a great extent to cover up his involvement in the crime and to ensure Lena Reyes Guedes' identity remained a mystery, seeing that he had cut off her fingers and traveled over 1,800 miles to dump her body in Utah, where she had no ties. Some people speculate that Edward Guedes might have been a controlling man who often abused Lena Reyes Guedes and made her uncomfortable. This photograph of the two shows Lena looking uncomfortable while Edward Guedes could be seen grasping her firmly by the shoulders. The video of Edward Guedes' interview with the police in October of 1998 portrays a man whose only interest is to cover up his own involvement in his wife's disappearance. Like a pro, he discussed the sleeping bag she was taking on her trip as a gift for her cousin, the one in which he had already concealed her dead body. He often laughed as he tells the investigator how he secured the bag and wrapped it up tight for the journey. Furthermore, to portray himself as a loving, attentive, and caring husband, he had told the detectives that Lena Reyes Guedes was wearing one of his favorite underwear that morning when she left. Some reports suggest that Lena Reyes Guedes might have been planning to leave Edward Guedes on April 8, 1998, implying that her trip to Mexico was more than just a simple family visit. We may never know the full truth, but thanks to DNA evidence and the keen eye of a dedicated true crime enthusiast, both investigators and Lena's family finally have answers about what happened to her 24 years ago. After the case was solved, Agent Brian Davis from the Utah Department of Public Safety remarked that getting closure after such a long time is incredible. He acknowledged that although it's not the answer Lena's sister hoped for, it was something they had suspected all along. In fact, her family had long believed that Edward was involved, but they hadn't been able to prove it. Lena's sister, Lucero Reyes, shared her feelings, saying, "For 20 years, I felt like no one would listen to me. Now that I know what happened, I'm here to bring her home, not in the way I expected, but I'm bringing her back with me." Moving on to the next case. Ashley Doolittle. In June 2016, just 3 weeks after celebrating her 18th birthday, Ashley Doolittle, a skilled horse rider and the 2016 rodeo lady in waiting, was feeling optimistic about her future. Having recently graduated from Berthoud High School in May and been accepted to Colorado State University, everything appeared to be on track. But on June 9th, when Ashley didn't return home and ignored calls and texts, her parents' excitement turned into deep concern. The next day, the Doolittle family was hit with heartbreaking news. Ashley had been murdered. The shocking case sent waves of grief throughout Colorado. The killer was not a stranger, but someone heartbreakingly close to her. Police quickly identified the suspect, making an arrest on the very day her body was found. This tragedy exposed how people can hide dark intentions behind a friendly facade, and Ashley saw that mask slip away moments before her life was taken. If you're new here, I release true crime documentaries every week. Make sure to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you in the loop on all upcoming cases. Ashley Marie Doolittle was born on May 20th, 1998, in Louisville, Colorado, to Marie and Jeff Doolittle. She had 2 brothers, Brandon and Michael. Ashley spent her early years in Lafayette, attending Louisville Middle School and Centaurus High School. Later, the family moved to Berthoud, where Ashley graduated from Berthoud High School. From an early age, she was bright, energetic, and full of passion. Her biggest loves were horses, agriculture, and making a lasting impact. At just 5 years old, Ashley rode her first pony, igniting a passion that would stay with her whole life. From that moment, horses became the centerpiece of her world. Her mother, and Marie, shared that horses were Ashley's life. The Doolittle home featured a sprawling farm with outdoor riding space, where Ashley could often be found caring for her animals and honing her riding skills. By the age of 18, Ashley had participated in numerous horse championships, earning several accolades along the way. Her dedication to horse-related projects, races, and judging had established her as a well-respected figure among her peers. Colorado provided the perfect environment for Ashley to thrive. Alongside her passion for horses, she was deeply invested in agriculture. Her active involvement in the Boulder County Fair inspired her to apply for the agricultural business program at Colorado State University. When Ashley received her acceptance letter, she was ecstatic, and her family was confident she was on the path to making a significant impact in her field. Ashley was also named the 2016 Rodeo Lady in Waiting, a role in which she mentored younger members of the rodeo community. Outside the rodeo, Ashley's greatest source of comfort was her beloved horse, Bubba. Their bond was extraordinary. And for Ashley, Bubba wasn't just a horse, he was family. For horse owners, animals like Bubba often hold as much importance as the people in their lives. However, Ashley also had another significant figure in her life, Tanner Flores, her boyfriend. The two met in high school and quickly became close, beginning a relationship despite their differences. Ashley was ambitious and driven, while Tanner, a high school dropout, planned to stay near his hometown and help with his father's trucking business. Initially, their relationship seemed fine, but cracks soon began to show, largely due to Tanner's controlling behavior. Within a year, Ashley started to notice Tanner's manipulative tendencies. Tanner had a need to dominate every aspect of Ashley's life, dictating what she could and couldn't do, where she went, and who she spent time with. He constantly monitored her, checked her phone, and interrogated her about her interactions. His extreme possessiveness quickly became overbearing. Tired of Tanner's behavior, Ashley decided to end the relationship. However, Tanner refused to accept the breakup, ignoring Ashley's attempts to move on. He incessantly badgered her to reconcile, bombarding her with texts and accusations of infidelity even though they were no longer together. One particularly alarming text from Tanner, sent on June 8, 2016, encapsulated his volatile state of mind. It read, "I hope you realize what you threw away. I gave you everything and spent so much money on you. You are nothing near loyal. I'm going to do something stupid now. Bye." This text was sent after Ashley had officially ended her relationship with Tanner. It seemed like Tanner believed that his behavior might somehow win her back. Unfortunately, his actions only grew more concerning. Tanner frequently threatened to harm himself if Ashley didn't respond to his texts or agree to get back together. His mention of doing something stupid appeared to be yet another attempt to manipulate her and grab her attention. Tanner often pressured Ashley to meet up with him. While she refused on some occasions, shockingly, she agreed to meet him at times, but only to reaffirm that their relationship was over. Despite Tanner's troubling behavior, Ashley remained polite and composed. In one of her messages, she wrote, "I never cheated on you. I never did anything with anyone else while we were together. Our relationship has been over for a long time. I wanted to be friends, but that isn't possible." However, just a day after Tanner's alarming text, Ashley went missing. On June 9, 2016, Tanner asked Ashley to meet him again. The plan was for Ashley to drive to the reservoir where they would meet and then head to Carter Lake, a secluded spot about 11 minutes away, to talk about their relationship. Hours passed, and Ashley's parents became worried when they hadn't heard back from her. They began searching for her, and by 8 p.m., they found her car abandoned in the reservoir parking lot. Concerned, they reported Ashley missing, and an investigation was launched. Friends and family were contacted, but no one had seen her except for one person, Tanner Flores. When Tanner's name kept surfacing in conversations, the police became increasingly suspicious. They were shocked to learn that Tanner was struggling with the breakup and hadn't taken it well. When the police interviewed Tanner's friends, they revealed that Tanner had been acting erratically since the split. He seemed deeply depressed and even expressed suicidal thoughts. But when the authorities spoke with Tanner's parents, the case took a chilling turn. It shifted from a single missing person investigation to a search for two teens. Alarmingly, one of Tanner's father's loaded firearms was also missing from the family's collection. For investigators, finding Ashley and Tanner unharmed became a race against time. A bolo, be on the lookout, was issued for Tanner's pickup truck, and search efforts intensified. The search took a grim turn on June 10th, when someone reported Tanner's truck 5 hours away from the reservoir in Colebran, Colorado. The vehicle was found on land that had once belonged to Tanner's late grandfather. As investigators made the 5-hour journey, a wildlife ranger kept watch over the truck. What he observed was deeply unsettling. Tanner was seen throwing blood-stained rags out of the vehicle. Even more horrifying, he was spotted carrying a rolled-up blanket from his grandfather's house and placing it in the truck's back seat. Witnesses feared the worst and anxiously awaited the arrival of law enforcement, certain that something terrible had occurred. As soon as detectives arrived, Tanner was arrested on the spot. When the blanket was unwrapped, it revealed the heartbreaking and expected truth. 18-year-old Ashley Doolittle was inside. She had been shot 3 times at close range, and the person responsible for pulling the trigger was without a doubt Tanner. Imagining Ashley's final moments betrayed and terrified by someone she once trusted is deeply disturbing. The fact that Tanner committed such a heinous act simply because he couldn't accept their breakup is chilling. With Tanner in custody, investigators began piecing together the case. However, Tanner wasn't exactly forthcoming. He tried to spin a story hoping to evade justice even when the evidence against him was undeniable. If Tanner's actions weren't infuriating enough, his initial version of events is sure to leave you seething. During a recorded interview, Tanner admitted to meeting Ashley at Lon Hagler Reservoir to talk. According to him, they later drove to Carter Lake where the conversation went well. However, on their way back, Tanner claimed that Ashley suddenly took hold of the gun and pointed it at herself for reasons he conveniently didn't explain. In his account, Tanner played the hero, saying he tried to wrestle the gun away from Ashley. During the struggle, the weapon allegedly went off, striking her. Incredibly, Tanner claimed that this first shot didn't kill Ashley. Instead of calling for help, he decided to fire 2 more times to end her suffering. This story was as implausible as it was cruel, and investigators saw through it immediately. Realizing his lie wasn't going to hold up, Tanner eventually confessed to the crime. Tanner admitted that Ashley's death wasn't premeditated, but occurred in a moment of rage. He claimed the breaking point was a glare Ashley gave him during an argument in his truck about their breakup. That look, according to Tanner, caused him to lose control entirely. After taking Ashley's life, Tanner attempted to cover his tracks. He took her phone, and at 4:26 p.m., sent himself a message pretending to be her. The text read, "I'm not meeting you today." Following his confession, Tanner was initially held at Mesa County Jail before being transferred to Larimer County Jail. He was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping, and preparations began for his trial, which commenced in October 2017, over a year after Ashley's tragic and untimely death. The primary question during the trial wasn't whether Tanner committed the murder. His guilt was evident. Instead, the court focused on whether his actions were premeditated or a crime of passion. Tanner's defense aimed to reduce the charge to second-degree murder, arguing the crime was unplanned and impulsive, while the prosecution sought to prove otherwise. This debate was quickly settled when Tanner's actions on the day of the crime came to light. It was revealed that Tanner and Ashley met at Lon Hagler Reservoir before driving to Carter Lake. Earlier that same morning, Tanner had visited the lake alone, carrying his father's gun, supposedly to practice shooting. The prosecution argued that the secluded setting of Carter Lake indicated Tanner had chosen it deliberately as a place to commit the crime without any witnesses. During Tanner's video interview, more insight into his mindset was revealed. When a detective asked why he aimed for Ashley's head instead of another area, Tanner chillingly replied, "I just thought that it would be an instant thing." This confession dismantled the defense's claim that the crime was unplanned, proving Tanner never intended to let Ashley survive the encounter. Even more unsettling was Tanner's weapon choice, a single-action revolver that requires manual cocking after every shot. Despite several opportunities to stop, Tanner fired a third round when the first two failed to kill Ashley. Afterwards, he tried to hide his actions by using Ashley's phone to send himself a message. The cold and calculated nature of Tanner's actions was shocking, especially for someone only 19 years old. His public defender argued that Tanner's actions were not premeditated, but instead the result of emotional distress. They claimed Tanner was devastated by Ashley's decision to end their relationship while he was still deeply in love with her. The defense repeatedly referred to Ashley as the love of Tanner's life, an irrelevant and baffling attempt to mitigate the severity of his actions. It almost seemed as though they were implying the crime was understandable due to Tanner's emotions. On October 5, 2017, Tanner Flores was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole, along with an additional 32 years for kidnapping. The kidnapping charge stemmed from him holding Ashley in his truck against her will. At the sentencing, Ashley's mother, Anne Marie, gave a powerful and emotional statement. Tanner did more than murder Ashley. He destroyed two families. Anne Marie's compassion was evident even in her grief. She acknowledged the pain Tanner's family was enduring, showcasing the strength and empathy of the Doolittle family. Ashley's funeral was held on June 17, 2016, and approximately 700 people attended, reflecting the deep impact she had on her community. John the Evangelist Catholic Parish in Loveland became the gathering place for family and friends to bid farewell to Ashley. This church held special significance for her. Just a month earlier, in May 2016, she stood on its stage celebrating her high school graduation. Now a casket lay at the center, surrounded by hundreds of mourners remembering Ashley's light, her zest for life, and the joy she brought to others. Tanner Flores, the source of the Doolittle family's pain and heartbreak, was finally behind bars. Yet the deep wounds he caused to Ashley's family and the community remained fresh. Ashley, an unsuspecting victim of a seemingly innocent young relationship, left behind grieving parents who would carry this burden forever. As in relationships often goes unnoticed, cloaked under behaviors that appear normal, this hidden danger is a reality the Doolittle family vowed to bring to light. In Ashley's honor, they established the Ashley Doolittle Foundation in March 2017. The foundation seeks to educate young people about recognizing and fostering healthy relationships, helping teens and others address issues before they escalate into something worse. Ashley's legacy also lives on in her contributions to the rodeo community. In 2017, she was posthumously crowned Rodeo Queen, reflecting her love for horses, agriculture, and Western culture. Colorado State University, where Ashley had been accepted, also paid tribute to her, honoring her as a bright, ambitious young woman with limitless potential. One of Ashley's dreams, the Princess Project, took flight in 2017. Each year, two participants known as Ashley's Princesses continue her mission of celebrating Western heritage and building a community of self-reliant and loyal individuals. This initiative ensures Ashley's vision endures, inspiring others to embrace the Western lifestyle and live with purpose. It's truly heartbreaking to witness bright, talented young individuals like Ashley become trapped in harmful relationships. These experiences can erode their self-esteem, extinguish their spark, and leave deep emotional wounds. Breaking free from an abusive relationship is often incredibly difficult and feels like the hardest step to take. Yet, identifying the warning signs early can be life-saving. Support is always within reach, and it's vital to remember that everyone deserves a life filled with love, respect, and personal growth, not fear. Never accept anyone who diminishes your achievements or dulls your shine. You deserve so much more than that. Moving on to the next case. Patrice Andres. Patrice Andres was a 38-year-old woman from Cumming, Georgia, who lived with her husband, Rob, and her 15-year-old son, Pistol. She and Rob met when she was 30 and he was 50. Rob often said that marrying Patrice made him the happiest man in the world. She owned a hair salon where she specialized in cutting and dyeing hair. Many of her clients would stay and chat with her long after their appointments. Beloved by her community, Patrice had a deep passion for hairstyling and making people feel their best. She dedicated herself to building her salon into a thriving business, attracting many loyal customers who continued to return. She was also a devoted mother, actively involved in Pistol's life, attending all of his meets and games. Above all, she wanted to spread happiness to those around her. On the morning of April 15, 2004, Patrice woke Pistol up in her usual way by running on a treadmill. That morning, they had a brief argument because Pistol was in a rush to get to school. After dropping him off at his high school, she headed to work. A few hours later, while Pistol was in biology class, he was called to the office, where he was asked if he could get in touch with his mother. Pistol tried calling Patrice 3 times, but she didn't answer, a red flag since she always returned missed calls right away. Unbeknownst to him, one of Patrice's clients had already reported her missing after arriving at the salon and finding her gone. When Sheriff Ron Freeman arrived at the salon and found no trace of Patrice, he immediately suspected something was wrong. He also noticed that the cash register was open and some money was missing. Patrice's purse was still on the counter, and her lunch remained untouched in the microwave. Aside from these details, everything else in the salon appeared normal, leaving everyone confused about her sudden disappearance. However, one unusual thing stood out. Her car was not parked in its usual spot on the left side of the salon. Instead, it was positioned directly in front of the building that day. With little evidence to guide them, investigators launched an immediate search. Helicopters scanned the area from above while search teams combed the woods behind the salon. When no sign of Patrice was found, authorities turned to reconstructing a timeline of her last known movements. At 8:50 a.m., her first client, Pam Shepard, arrived for her appointment. Pam later told police that Patrice seemed distracted and unusually inattentive during their session. At 11:05 a.m., Pam leaves the salon and Patrice is still there. 5 minutes later, at 11:10 a.m., Paul Cantor arrives for his haircut. He left the salon at 11:27 a.m. He received a phone call as he was leaving. That is how police knew what the time was. Then at 11:35 a.m., a customer calls Patrice. The customer told police that Patrice was sort of short on the phone, which was unusual. The call lasts for about 2 minutes until 11:37 a.m. The next call that came in was 11:50 a.m. and it goes unanswered. The conclusion that can be made is that something happened to Patrice in that 13 minutes. After having asked Pistol to try and get into contact with his mom to no avail, the police took him to Patrice's hair salon. Only then did they tell him that she was missing. Pistol was sure she would come back. She couldn't just be gone. Rob also later arrived at a hair salon. He was then informed that he would have to go to a station for some questioning. Rob claims since he has a degree in criminology, he wasn't surprised by this. He knew he would have to be questioned since he was Patrice's husband, and in some missing persons cases, it turns out that his spouse was responsible for the disappearance. It did not take long for the police to receive a possible lead. 2 eyewitnesses came forward, and they both saw pretty much the same thing. Also important to note, the 2 witnesses did not know each other at all. At 11:45 a.m., Tammy Fincher noticed that Patrice's car was parked in front of the store while she drove past the hair salon. She also noticed a Chevy Lumina parked right next to it. The Chevy Lumina did have a Georgia license plate according to her. The second witness had also drove past the hair salon basically at the same time as Tammy, saw the same, but he believed it is a Ford Taurus or possibly a Malibu. Tammy Fincher saw 2 women standing in front of the car, one of them being really tall. The second witness, however, believes that a tall woman is actually a man with long hair. Since these 2 witnesses are basically the same thing, and they are totally independent of each other, the police saw them as being credible. After searching through the woods for Patrice for hours, young Pistol went back home. The next day, he learned that Rob changed the locks of the house. Rob didn't allow Pistol to come back in at all. Bristol was 8 years old when Rob and Patrice got married on the March 2nd, 1997. Rob and Pistol never liked each other. Pistol remembers that in the first year, Rob was really nice and tried to be a stepfather. It didn't last long, however, and Rob totally changed his attitude towards Pistol. Rob would walk past his room and just say really crude stuff. This went on for years. Many of Patrice's friends describe Rob as being very jealous. Rob was especially jealous when Pistol got attention from Patrice. He wanted her all to himself. In the Unsolved Mysteries episode of Patrice's case, Pistol said that she talked about divorcing Rob a couple of weeks before her disappearance. Rob, on the other hand, denied this and said things were going very well from his point of view. After Rob changed the locks and Pistol couldn't get in, he had to go live with his father on a farm. As you can imagine, this was a really hard time in Pistol's life. His mom was gone, his stepdad kicked him out, and his father had crippling depression. As time went on, Bristol got more and more anxious about Patrice still being gone. Initially, he believed that she maybe went elsewhere to start a new life for them, away from Rob, and that she would be coming to pick him up anytime. Every single night, Patricia's father sat on his couch looking out a window, just waiting for her to return, but she never did. One of the suspects police looked at was Carey Michael Hilton. The police knew that he was in the area on that day. He once made a statement that his favorite place to go was a hair salon when he was looking for easy targets, referring to women whose life he Jeremy Jones. On a surface, he appeared to be an average guy, but he liked to abuse women and win in their lives afterwards. Jeremy told police that he was driving and he decided to stop at a hair salon. He drew a picture of where his car was parked and where her car was parked and was very accurate. He told investigators that he threw her body in Sweetwater Creek in Douglasville, Georgia. An extensive search was done off the area, but no son of Patrice was found there at all. Soon after, Jeremy Jones of Drury's confession. Jeremy Jones and Gary Michael Hilton are still considered suspects. 20 months after Patrice disappeared, on the December 6, 2005, a man by the name of Albert Clark found a skull. The skull was found near the Lebanon Baptist Church, about 6 miles from Patrice's salon. Authorities quickly confirmed that the skull belonged to Patrice. With this discovery, it became clear that she hadn't run away. Someone had taken her life. After learning this, Pistol went to the police, expressing his belief that Rob was responsible. He suspected that Patrice's desire for a divorce had angered Rob. Many of Patrice's friends shared this suspicion, and viewers of the Unsolved Mysteries episode covering her case also speculated about Rob's possible involvement. Rob, however, insisted that his involvement was impossible due to the timeline of events. Investigators acknowledged that while it wasn't entirely impossible, it was highly unlikely. One particularly disturbing detail about Rob was his behavior at the funeral home. He rearranged Patrice's bones to make them resemble a full body. He also openly displayed her ashes and claimed that he slept next to them every night. Despite his unsettling actions, police never found any concrete evidence linking him to her death. Moving on to the next case. Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould, a 22-year-old student at Northwest Arkansas Community College in Fayetteville, was visiting friends in Guyon, a small town along the White River, in September 2004. On September 22nd, she dropped off her boyfriend at work and then stopped by a convenience store in Melbourne, Arkansas, the last time anyone saw her. Her sudden disappearance was unusual, especially since she had plans to drive back to college with her sister. At the residence where Rebecca had been staying, investigators found her car, keys, cash, and handbag untouched. The case took a darker turn when they discovered blood beneath the mattress. A week after Rebecca vanished, her body was found about 5 miles outside Melbourne, down an embankment near Arkansas State Highway 9. She had suffered a brutal bludgeoning. For 16 years, authorities pursued leads to uncover the person responsible for this crime. Then, in November 2020, Arkansas State Police announced the arrest of 44-year-old William Alama Miller, a resident of Oregon. The specific motive behind the crime and the evidence that led police to him have not been disclosed publicly. However, some facts about William are known. At the time of the crime, he was living in Texas but was in Arkansas when the incident occurred. Afterward, he relocated to Lane County, Oregon. He also spent several years living in the Philippines before returning to the U.S., where he was eventually arrested. Since details from the police remain limited and can be frustrating, I'll update the pinned comment with more information as it becomes available. Moving on to the next case. Ivonne, please. A disturbing discovery was made on September 8, 1977, when a woman's remains were found in a wooded area off Riverside Drive in Macon, Georgia. The gruesome scene, marked by scattered body parts and a stench that had lingered in the neighborhood for weeks, would go unresolved for more than 40 years. Ultimately, the case would be linked to one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. The remains were located roughly a mile north of Arkwright Road, in the front yard of a house that had become a focal point of concern due to persistent complaints about a foul odor. When investigators arrived, they determined that animals had disturbed the scene, causing the remains to be scattered across the area. Only select body parts were recovered, including both hands, shoulder blades, sections of the limbs, and part of the torso. Despite exhaustive efforts to search the surrounding area, law enforcement was unable to locate other critical parts of the body. The incomplete remains significantly hampered their ability to determine the exact cause of death. Additionally, the advanced decomposition of the body further hindered forensic analysis, making it difficult to uncover any concrete evidence about what had transpired in the weeks before the woman's remains were discovered. Although officials were unable to confirm the exact cause of the woman's death, there was a strong belief that she had been strangled. However, due to the body's condition and the absence of definitive forensic proof, this suspicion remained unverified. Investigators suspected that the individual responsible had left her remains in the wooded area, relying on nature and wildlife to destroy evidence. A major breakthrough occurred in 2012 when Kentucky authorities arrested Samuel Little on drug charges. That arrest proved significant, as DNA analysis connected him to 3 murders in California. This discovery led investigators to take a closer look at Little's background, uncovering a long history of violence across numerous states over many years. In 2018, Little began confessing to a series of past killings, including one from 1977, the same year the unidentified woman's remains were found off Riverside Drive. While full details of his confession regarding this victim have not been made public, reports indicated that Little had a strong emotional reaction to a forensic reconstruction of her face. He criticized the depiction, claiming it did not accurately resemble the woman he remembered. This reaction added an additional layer of complexity to the investigation, highlighting the challenges in identifying victims from such a long time ago and incomplete evidence. Little's extensive criminal record revealed that between 1970 and February 2005, he had taken the lives of up to 90 women across the United States. He told Texas Ranger James Holland that taking the lives of women were like an illegal substance to him. He said he came to like it. His victims were predominantly marginalized individuals, such as prostitutes and illegal substance addicts, whom often went unnoticed or were reported missing only after significant delays. Little strangled most of his victims, usually soon after meeting them during chance encounters, and he would not leave much evidence for the police. He was not wrong. The police around the country initially classified many of the demises as accidents, illegal substance overdoses, or the result of unknown causes. His confessions led to his conviction for 8 slayings in 3 states, and he was linked to 61 additional slayings, marking him as one of the most prolific serial offenders in American history. Despite his convictions and confessions, investigations into Little's full range of crimes are ongoing. The authorities continue to explore whether he was involved in other unsolved cases, striving to piece together the complete scope of his violent activities. Samuel Little's demise in 2020, at nearly 80 years old in prison, did not end the quest for justice. Instead, it underscored the complexity of his crimes and the enduring efforts to resolve the numerous unsolved cases associated with him. Just before he lost his life, he said that there were probably innocent people in jail for some of his crimes. He said, "Probably be numerous people who are, or has been convicted and sent to penitentiary on my behalf. I say, if I can help get somebody out of jail, God might smile a little bit more on me." Little spoke mostly about his victims. He also said, "They were broke and homeless, and they walked right into my spider web." The investigation into Little's criminal activities remain a priority for law enforcement agencies. The case of the unidentified woman from 1977, among others, continued to be scrutinized as investigators seek to confirm whether Little's confessions can provide closure for the victims and their families. The Bibb County Sheriff's Office, working alongside the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, CJCC, made a major breakthrough in the long unsolved case of the unidentified woman discovered in 1977. Utilizing cutting-edge DNA technology developed by forensic company Othram, investigators were able to identify the victim in May 2023 as Ivonne, a young woman believed to have been around 19 or 20 years old at the time of her death. Samuel Little's connection to the case was confirmed through his confessions, including remarks made during a 2019 60 Minutes interview. The details he provided closely matched those of the Macon cold case, substantiating suspicions that he was responsible for Ivonne's death. This key piece of evidence definitively linked Little to the crime, finally solving a mystery that had lingered for more than 40 years. Although Ivonne's identity was confirmed, authorities initially struggled to locate her family, complicating efforts to notify next of kin. On November 14, 2023, officials publicly announced the resolution of the case, bringing long-awaited closure to a tragedy that had remained unanswered for nearly half a century. Moving on to the next case. Leslie Reyes and Chris Smith. An obsession is often defined as an overwhelming fixation on a specific thought or desire that consumes a person's mind. This intense focus can drive individuals to commit shocking and unpredictable actions. Removing any mysticism or superstition, such behavior is commonly tied to romantic obsession, an extreme preoccupation with another person that pushes someone beyond the limits of reason. Usually, this deep emotional and psychological turmoil builds gradually, eventually causing the individual's mental state to deteriorate and leading to impulsive, uncontrollable behavior. The tragic and violent crime involving fitness trainer Leslie Reyes and musician Chris Smith in the fall of 2021 shook the quiet town of Farmersville, Illinois, to its core. The couple seemed to have a promising future, but their second date turned into a heartbreaking event that took one life and forever changed another. While the motive was clear, it took investigators almost 3 years to collect enough evidence to close the case, nearly letting the culprit go free. Chris Smith was born in 1973 in Hillsborough, the county seat of Montgomery County, Illinois. He was the eldest of 3 siblings, raised in a close-knit and supportive family. Sadly, their father passed away early in their lives, leaving their mother, Sharon, to raise Chris and his younger sisters on her own. Sharon worked relentlessly to provide everything her children needed. Chris pursued a solid education and eventually launched a small business focused on building swimming pools. The business thrived, enabling him to buy a spacious home in the quiet rural town of Farmersville. But his real passion was music. Chris was a skilled guitarist with an outstanding singing voice, and he started a country music band. The band played in bars and clubs across the state, earning modest local recognition. Known for his approachable nature, Chris stayed clear of legal troubles, avoided illegal drugs, and showed little interest in alcohol. At 32, Chris married, and a few years later, he and his wife welcomed their only daughter. However, after 15 years together, their marriage began to unravel, leading to a separation. Despite the divorce, Chris and his ex-wife maintained a good relationship for the sake of their daughter. He remained actively involved in her life, supported her financially, and often spent weekends and holidays with her. Chris was known by those around him as a kind, hard-working, and approachable man. In his hometown, he was something of a local celebrity. Everyone recognized him, and his band's performances always attracted a full house. Naturally, his talent and good looks made him popular with women. But a year after his divorce, Chris was still single and not rushing into new relationships. That changed one October evening in 2021 when he met the charming Leslie Reyes at a local bar. Leslie Abigail Reyes was also a native of Hillsborough, born in 1977. She earned a degree in a technical field, though she never worked in her profession. Leslie was drawn to creative pursuits. She was deeply passionate about dance and taught yoga at a fitness club. Leslie, like Chris, had experienced an unsuccessful marriage. Her relationship ended due to her ex-husband's aggressive behavior, which had made her fear for her safety. This prompted her to file for divorce and take up martial arts to ensure she could protect herself in the future. Leslie eventually earned a certification as a self-defense instructor and began teaching women's self-defense classes. She was described as sweet, outgoing, and compassionate, someone who couldn't walk past someone in need without offering help. Leslie was raising her children on her own, as her ex-husband provided no support. Despite her struggles, she remained hopeful that she would one day meet someone worthy of her trust and affection. Unfortunately, her dating life was far from smooth. Shortly before meeting Chris, Leslie had ended a toxic relationship with a controlling and aggressive partner. On Saturday, October 30th, 2021, after finishing work, Leslie decided to unwind at one of the city's popular night spots. That evening, a local band, led by Chris Smith as its founder and vocalist, was performing. Chris couldn't help but notice a stunning blonde in the crowd with a dazzling smile. After his set, he approached her and offered to buy her a drink. The two hit it off instantly, discovering a shared love for music and a natural connection that kept them talking late into the night. By the time they parted ways, it felt to both like they'd known each other forever. They exchanged phone numbers and started talking daily. However, their busy work schedules and the fact that they lived in different towns made it hard to meet again. Finally, on November 20th, Chris called Leslie and suggested they meet for Thanksgiving at the same bar where they'd first met. To ensure they'd have a spot on the busy holiday evening, he reserved a table in advance, knowing it would be nearly impossible to find a free one otherwise. Leslie Reyes was thrilled and eagerly accepted Chris's invitation to meet. She shared the news of the upcoming date with her close friend, Nana, confidently declaring that she had found the man of her dreams, someone she could see herself building a life with. Leslie seemed deeply infatuated, filled with happiness, and excitedly prepared for the evening, though she admitted to feeling a little nervous. Nana encouraged Leslie to stay in touch throughout the night, just in case anything unexpected happened. Leslie agreed to send updates. Although she was certain everything would go perfectly, she had no doubts about Chris and believed the evening would turn out wonderfully. At the scheduled time, the couple met at the same bar where they had first encountered each other 3 weeks earlier. Leslie looked stunning, and the two had a fantastic time together. Other patrons noticed the lively and happy couple, engrossed in conversation, radiating joy, and enjoying each other's company. As planned, Leslie periodically messaged Nana to keep her updated about how the date was going. Around 11 p.m., Leslie texted to say she and Chris were heading to his home in Farmersville, about 60 miles from the bar. At Nana's insistence, Leslie shared the address with her, just in case, but reassured her that everything was fine. They were both adults after all. Nana went to bed that night feeling confident that her friend was safe and the date had gone as planned. However, she didn't hear her phone buzz around 1:30 a.m. when she received a chilling message from Leslie. The text consisted of just one word: help. The next morning, Nana saw the message and immediately tried to contact Leslie. Her calls and texts went unanswered. Growing increasingly worried, Nana decided to act. Since she had Chris's home address, she got in her car and drove to Farmersville. While on the way, she called the local authorities, fearing that something terrible might have happened to Leslie. At that point, Nana suspected that Chris might have done something to her friend or was holding her against her will. The drive to Chris's farmhouse took Nana just over an hour. When she arrived, she saw another car pulling up at the same time. The driver was a young man named Jeffrey, a friend and bandmate of Chris's. Jeffrey explained that he hadn't been able to reach Chris all morning and decided to stop by to check on him. Together, Nana and Jeffrey circled the house, peering through the windows, trying to figure out what was going on inside. When they reached the back door, they noticed shattered glass and a broken lock. Someone had clearly forced their way in. But where were the homeowner and his guest? The young man, Jeffrey, went inside first while Nana waited outside. The house was eerily quiet, and there were signs of disarray. As Jeffrey ventured further, he saw a figure lying motionless on the floor in a dark pool. Shocked, he immediately ran back outside. He and Nana immediately called emergency services, reporting what they had found without disturbing the scene or attempting to investigate further themselves. When police and paramedics arrived at the farmhouse, they discovered 2 victims suffering from gunshot wounds. Sadly, the woman had already died and showed no signs of life. However, to everyone's astonishment, the man, despite heavy blood loss and a serious head injury, was still alive. His pulse was weak, but he was breathing. Emergency personnel rushed him to the nearest hospital, though doctors were pessimistic about his chances of survival given the severity of his injuries. Initial theories suggested the couple had returned to Chris's home, where a heated argument escalated into violence. It was believed that Chris had retrieved a firearm during the altercation, resulting in a deadly struggle where his guest was killed and he himself suffered critical wounds. However, this theory was soon dismissed. First, the weapon used in the crime was not found at the scene, indicating it had been taken by the perpetrator. Second, Clear evidence of forced entry was discovered at the back door, where the glass was shattered and the lock broken. This suggested an intruder had entered the home, catching the couple off guard. The state of the house also indicated a struggle. Items were scattered throughout, but nothing of value was taken, ruling out robbery as a potential motive. Autopsy reports later revealed that both Leslie and Chris had suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. Leslie's body was found in the kitchen, where it appeared she had attempted to hide. The refrigerator had been pushed out of place, and a bullet hole was visible in its side. The kitchen door had been broken down, indicating that Leslie had likely tried to barricade herself inside by using the refrigerator to block the entrance. Tragically, her efforts were unsuccessful. In the living room, investigators found an open bottle of wine and 2 glasses on a small table. Meanwhile, a burnt pizza was discovered still smoking in the oven. The scene made it clear that the couple had been preparing for a romantic evening with no expectation of an intruder disrupting their plans. Chris had a dog named Tiki, a loyal companion who played a critical role in the aftermath of the attack. Throughout the night, Tiki stayed by his injured owner's side, keeping him warm and covering the wound on his head. Investigators later concluded that the dog's actions significantly reduced Chris's blood loss, ultimately saving his life. When Nana learned of her close friend Leslie's tragic death, her first action was to contact Leslie's family and inform them of the devastating news. Meanwhile, Jeffrey called Chris's mother, Sharon, and told her that her son was in critical condition in the hospital. Overcome with fear that they might not see him alive, Sharon and her younger daughter immediately set out for the hospital where Chris had been taken. The doctors operated on Chris for several hours, but were unable to remove the bullet lodged in his head. It was positioned between the brain hemispheres, and in any attempt to extract it carried a high risk of fatal complications. The medical team decided to leave the bullet in place, focusing instead on stabilizing his condition. Chris had lost a significant amount of blood, was extremely weak, and was placed in a medically induced coma to reduce stress on his body and allow him a chance to recover. As the sole survivor, Chris was a vital witness who could potentially identify the attacker. Without his testimony, it would be incredibly difficult to piece together the events of that fateful night. However, his condition remained critical, and doctors refrained from making any optimistic predictions. Both Chris and Leslie were known as calm, level-headed individuals who avoided conflicts, had no known enemies, and had never been involved in any legal trouble. They maintained amicable relationships with their former spouses, and it seemed as though neither had anyone with ill intentions toward them. However, Nana was the first to suggest that Leslie's ex-boyfriend, Robert Tarr, could be the only person with a motive to harm her. Leslie had met Robert online about a year earlier, and their initial connection had been strong. Robert, like Leslie, was divorced and had 2 children from different relationships. His eldest daughter was the same age as Leslie's. For nearly 2 months, the two exchanged messages and phone calls before deciding to meet in person. Though they began dating, Leslie quickly realized that Robert was not the kind of man she wanted to build a life with. Robert had a volatile temper and displayed controlling and aggressive behavior. He sought to dominate Leslie, demanding that everything be done his way. What he failed to account for was that Leslie was a strong and independent woman who refused to let anyone manipulate her. After 6 months, Leslie made the decision to end the relationship, informing Robert in person. However, he was unwilling to let her go and began to stalk her. He constantly called, sent her dozens of messages every day, and appeared at places he knew she frequented. Leslie was not overly concerned about his behavior, believing she could handle herself if necessary. By October, Robert's behavior had grown increasingly obsessive. Leslie blocked him on all messaging apps and social media platforms, refusing to answer his attempts to reach her. Despite her efforts, Robert acted as though they were still a couple, becoming consumed by his fixation on her. Leslie's friends expressed concern about his behavior, but she remained calm, confident in her ability to protect herself. Another close friend of Leslie's, a woman named Emma, also identified Robert Tarr as the main suspect. Emma confirmed that Robert had been stalking Leslie and posed a real threat. She gave the police both Robert's home address and the address of his ex-wife, hoping these leads would aid the investigation. When officers arrived at Robert Tarr's residence, he seemed unfazed and didn't even ask why they were there. He stayed calm and didn't request a lawyer. During questioning, Robert claimed that he and Leslie had never truly ended their relationship, though he admitted things had recently become tense between them. He saw Leslie's connection with Chris Smith as a betrayal. However, he strongly denied any involvement in the crime at Chris's farmhouse. He insisted he had never been to Farmersville, didn't know Chris's address, and had spent Thanksgiving evening with his eldest daughter, Shelby, who could verify his alibi. According to Robert, he picked up Shelby around 5 p.m. from her mother's suburban home. They went shopping, stopped for ice cream at a mall cafe, and then returned to his home in Hillsborough. Robert's account was disjointed and inconsistent, and his alibi seemed unconvincing. Investigators brought in his 16-year-old daughter, Shelby, to provide a detailed timeline of her day with her father. Shelby confirmed that her dad picked her up around 5 p.m. and that they spent about an hour walking around before heading to his house. Once home, Robert suggested ordering pizza and anything else she wanted, but shortly after, he told Shelby he needed to step out for a while. He left around 6:30 p.m. and returned roughly 90 minutes later. Shelby noted that her father seemed deeply upset, was crying, but didn't explain why. She went to bed close to midnight, but was woken up around 3:30 a.m. by the sound of the washing machine running. Shelby described how her father paced back and forth, claiming he couldn't sleep. Forensic investigators had already determined that the shooting at Chris' home occurred around 1:30 a.m., leaving Robert without a solid alibi during the critical time frame. Detectives theorized that Robert had learned about Leslie's planned date with Chris. After dropping off his daughter at his home, he drove to the bar where Leslie and Chris were spending the evening. Witnessing them together reportedly shattered him emotionally. According to the working theory, Robert returned home briefly, but waited for Shelby to fall asleep. He then retrieved a firearm, drove back to the bar, and followed Leslie and Chris as they left, trailing them all the way to Chris's house in Farmersville. Robert did not act immediately, but instead observed the couple through the windows, watching them enjoy their evening together. Overcome with rage, he eventually forced his way into the house and carried out the attack. After the crime, Robert returned home and began destroying evidence. Shelby reported that he spent much of the early morning hours washing clothes with an excessive amount of chemicals, which investigators later linked to an attempt to remove incriminating traces. A search warrant for Robert Tarr's home was obtained the same day. During the search, detectives found a firearm, which they showed to Shelby. However, she stated she had never seen that weapon before and noted that her father owned a completely different gun, which she could only describe in vague terms. Ballistic tests later confirmed that the firearm found in Robert's home did not match the weapon used in the crime. Investigators then focused on tracing Robert's movements that night. Surveillance cameras along the route to Farmersville captured his car multiple times. Additionally, he had stopped at a gas station along the highway. While he paid in cash, 2 employees confidently identified him as the driver of the vehicle. Although there was no direct evidence tying Robert to the crime, the circumstantial evidence was mounting. The decision was made to arrest him while further investigation continued. When Robert was placed in custody, Chris's family felt a sense of relief, fearing that the perpetrator might otherwise attempt to ensure the key witness. Chris never regained consciousness. Robert immediately secured a high-profile attorney who saw the case as a career-defining opportunity. The defense lawyer gave interviews to several news outlets, asserting his client's innocence and confidently predicting that Robert would soon be released. Faced with mounting evidence that placed him in Farmersville on the night of the crime, Robert's version of events began to shift. He claimed that Leslie had called him from the bar and asked for a ride to a friend's house in another town. According to Robert, he agreed to drive her and dropped her off at the address she provided. He said he then returned home, where he became emotional, suspecting her of being unfaithful, but insisted he had no intention of harming her or anyone else. This new story raised numerous red flags. The timeline Robert provided did not align with surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, or even his own daughter's statements. When confronted with these inconsistencies, Robert claimed he had deliberately avoided telling Shelby where he was going that night because she didn't get along with Leslie. However, Shelby's own testimony contradicted this. During her interview, Shelby described Leslie as a kind and pleasant person. Meanwhile, Robert's lawyer maintained his client's innocence, highlighting that no blood, broken glass, or other incriminating evidence was found in Robert's vehicle. The attorney stressed that all accusations against Robert were purely circumstantial and called for his release from custody under supervised conditions. Shelby then provided a crucial lead when she revealed that her father had a hidden stash in a utility room in the backyard. Following this tip, investigators searched the area and discovered a firearm buried in the dirt floor of the storage cellar. The weapon was wrapped in heavy-duty plastic. Ballistic tests confirmed this gun was the one used to shoot Chris and Leslie. Although Robert had wiped his fingerprints from the weapon, he had overlooked the plastic wrapping, which still bore traces of his fingerprints. Moreover, microscopic blood particles matching Leslie's DNA were found on the firearm, likely transferred when the attacker fired at close range. Robert appeared visibly surprised at how quickly the police had located the weapon, but he wasted no time concocting an explanation. He claimed that the gun belonged to Leslie, who had been practicing shooting for self-defense. According to Robert, Leslie brought him the wrapped firearm a few days prior and asked him to hide it without providing further details. While this explanation addressed the presence of Leslie's DNA, Robert was unable to explain how bullets fired from this weapon ended up in both victims. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence and the inconsistencies in Robert's statements, proving his guilt remained a challenge. The investigation was stalling, and Robert's lawyer was preparing to celebrate a legal victory in this high-profile case. The prosecution's hopes rested on Chris, who was still in a coma, though his condition was gradually improving. The prosecution believed that if Chris regained consciousness, he could provide critical testimony about what had happened in his home that night. Robert, on the other hand, feared that Chris might survive and implicate him. In desperation, Robert attempted to hire a fellow inmate to ensure Chris never had the chance to speak. Robert offered his cellmate, who was due for release soon, $100,000 to infiltrate the hospital and harm Chris while he remained in a coma. As a gesture of good faith, Robert allegedly provided an upfront payment of $10,000. However, instead of carrying out the plan, the cellmate went directly to investigators and revealed Robert's plot. Authorities immediately increased security around Chris's hospital room, assigning round-the-clock guards to prevent any attempts to harm him. Meanwhile, Robert denied the accusations, claiming that his cellmate was fabricating the story and that he had never offered anyone money or sought to hire anyone for such a task. In January 2022, 2 months after the incident, Chris finally emerged from his coma. Unfortunately, his recovery brought little progress to the investigation. To the immense disappointment of detectives, Chris could not remember any details of the night in question. He didn't even recall Leslie or recognize her name. Chris struggled to comprehend his surroundings, was in significant pain, and experienced severe memory loss, leaving him unable to provide the testimony investigators so desperately needed. The man had to relearn how to walk, speak, and form coherent thoughts. He was unable to move independently as the left side of his body was almost completely paralyzed, and he required constant care provided by his mother and sisters. The trial for Robert Tarr was scheduled for March 2024. During this time, Chris Smith continued his rehabilitation, slowly making physical progress, but his memory of the night in question never returned. Chris declined to participate in the court proceedings, explaining that he couldn't provide any helpful testimony and that the process could be emotionally traumatic and detrimental to his recovery. Although there was still no direct evidence against Robert, the prosecution highlighted his obsession with Leslie as described by her friends and family. Witnesses testified that Robert had stalked Leslie, monitored her movements, and refused to accept that she had ended their relationship. Robert reportedly viewed her date with Chris as both a betrayal and a personal insult, leading him to take drastic and violent action. According to the prosecution, Robert had followed the couple throughout the evening. While they enjoyed their time at the bar, Robert returned home to retrieve his firearm. He then followed them to Farmersville and forcibly entered Chris's house, taking them by surprise. Although Leslie had extensive martial arts training, she was no match for a firearm. She tried to lock herself in the kitchen while Chris attempted to confront the attacker, but both were shot in the head. Sadly, Leslie's wounds proved fatal. Robert's defense lawyer passionately defended his client, pointing out the evidence was largely circumstantial, there were no direct eyewitnesses willing to testify, and alleging prosecutorial bias. Still, In October 2024, Robert Tarr was convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. He received a sentence of 85 years in prison, with parole eligibility only after 70 years, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life incarcerated. Moving on to the next case. Louisa Dunn. For nearly 60 years, the brutal murder of 75-year-old Louisa Dunn cast a heavy shadow over the streets of Bristol. Found lifeless in her home on a summer day in 1967, her case puzzled investigators and eventually went cold as time went on. However, a breakthrough in forensic science has recently revived the investigation, bringing fresh focus to one of England's oldest unsolved cases. Louisa Dunn was born in the early 1890s. She first married Teddy Parker, a respected city councillor. Louisa was expected to assume the prestigious role of mayoress, but that hope was dashed when Teddy died unexpectedly, leaving her widowed and her ambitions unfulfilled. Later, she found companionship again by marrying John Donne, a night watchman. Their life together was simpler but steady, providing Louisa with a sense of security after her earlier loss. Sadly, that stability was short-lived as John also passed away, leaving her widowed for the second time. Without the presence of family or close companions, Louisa gradually withdrew from public life. Once active in Bristol's social circles, neighbors described Louisa as a quiet, solitary woman by the 1960s, choosing to retreat into the confines of her home on Britannia Road in Easton. It was inside this modest home that Louisa's life would come to a shocking and violent end. It was late June 1967, and Britannia Road carried on as usual. Though 75-year-old Louisa was in many ways a recluse, her house remained unusually still. Neighbors became concerned when they had not seen Louisa for some time. One neighbor decided to check in on her. What they discovered shattered the quiet calm of the street. Louisa was found lying on the living room floor, her body showing clear signs of violence. The room itself bore little evidence of a struggle, but an autopsy would later find that Louisa had been assaulted and strangled. The exact timing of her tragic death remained uncertain, with investigators estimating it happened sometime in June. As news of the crime spread through the neighborhood, fear gripped the community, and Louisa's once peaceful home became the center of an investigation that would puzzle police for decades. Although the inquiry into Louisa's murder started promptly, it quickly turned into a challenge against the limitations of 1960s forensic technology. Officers thoroughly searched her home for any clues that could point to the killer. Early findings showed that she had died from strangulation and asphyxiation, but the crime scene offered few other leads, leaving detectives to wonder whether Louisa had known her attacker or if they had gained entry through deception. Detectives spoke with neighbors and residents nearby, hoping someone might have noticed something unusual in the days before her death. Items collected from the scene, such as fibers and trace evidence, failed to provide any immediate breakthroughs. As the investigation stretched on, public interest remained strong. Louisa's tragic murder dominated local news, stirring fear throughout the community and putting intense pressure on Avon and Somerset police. Various theories surfaced, but concrete leads eventually dried up. And without modern forensic tools, the investigators found themselves at an impasse. By the end of 1967, the trail had gone cold. The case was shelved but not forgotten, filed away among the growing list of unsolved slayings. The breakthrough finally came in 2023, more than half a century after Louisa Dunn's slaying. Avon and Somerset police, as part of a renewed focus on cold cases, began re-examining the evidence from that long-forgotten investigation. Advances in forensic science, particularly in DNA analysis, offered hope that the technology unavailable in 1967 might finally shed light on the mystery. Forensic experts meticulously reviewed items preserved from the crime scene, and they were able to detect traces that would have been invisible to investigators decades earlier. A piece of evidence gave them a crucial DNA profile. Investigators turned to modern databases and genealogy tools, piecing together connections that led them to an unexpected suspect. In November 2024, the police arrested 92-year-old Ryland Headley, a man living in Ipswich who had been in his 30s at the time of the crime. The DNA evidence connected him directly to the crime scene, thrusting the long-cold case back into public attention. The arrest represented a landmark moment, not just for the Dunn family, but for law enforcement as well. It became the oldest cold case in Avon and Somerset police history to lead to formal charges. This breakthrough was largely due to the relentless efforts of investigators who refused to let Louisa's story be forgotten. A plea and trial preparation hearing was scheduled for February 14, 2025. No bail application was submitted. Headley's trial is set to begin on June 16, 2025. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.